In this lesson, we're going to continue sketching out our 2D avatar by adding facial elements based off of our photo reference. So let's go ahead and dive right back in. So we're at a point now where I'm really happy with how the overall shape and blocking for our sketch has come out. Again, we're kind of going for a stylistic rendition of our goofy looking guy over here. And as I mentioned in the previous lesson, he kind of has like this light bulb shaped head, which is something I think we really played up nicely. So we're ready to begin adding in just all his different really animated facial elements that he seems to have over here. So making sure that we're clicked on our tab for our canvas window here, let's have a look at our layers panel. Before we go further, you'll notice that I've added a new layer which I've titled Sketch. So this is the layer we'll begin adding all those facial elements onto. And below it, on our sketch blocking layer, with that selected, let's go ahead and take the opacity down to around 50%. And this just allows me to differentiate between the information that I'm adding on my sketch layer and my sketch blocking layer. So let's go ahead and zoom in and get started on the nose. Now, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, he kind of has a pretty prominent nose. Definitely up here in the bridge of the nose and kind of down on the bottom. Now you may have noticed that his head is tilted slightly towards the screen right. And so I'm going to try and straighten out a few things with the nose and with the ears. I'd like to be able to see more of this ear over here. Now this isn't something you just absolutely have to do, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm thinking about how this avatar is going to read at a small size. I don't want any kind of facial elements, any kind of elements at all to be confusing, to be read as visually confusing. So we're just going to straighten out a few things. So I'm just looking at his nose and I'm trying to get just an overall feel for kind of how it might look straightened out. He's got some prominent bumps, especially he's got a very prominent bridge of the nose. So just kind of putting that into account. And that's starting to feel pretty nice. Let's go ahead and work our way down to this smile. I think this smile that he has is classic. I think it's got a lot of character to it. Just the way he's got it kind of pushed in, just like he has his head kind of pushed into his neck, I feel like he's got this mouth also somehow pushed inward, especially at the corners, which is what is also giving us these very prominent smile lines. That's feeling pretty nice, just working in these prominent smile lines that he has here. Now, one thing we're going to be mindful of is we're not going to work in every single wrinkle on his head, just because, again, as we get a lot of these wrinkles start to run together, and if we draw too many, they're going to kind of appear muddy and muddled when we shrink down this avatar. Now, I'm about to add in the tongue, and I'm thinking I may not want to show it exactly the way he has it. So let's go ahead and click on the tab for this window right here. And just looking at it shrunken down, I don't know if that registers well at a small size. Again, this avatar is probably going to be shrunken down maybe around 1 inch by 1 inch. So we're keeping that in mind, and we may change up and simplify a few things. So I'm kind of giving him a more simplified tongue there. Just working in these little smile lines. Now, one thing I may not have mentioned in the previous lesson is if you already know kind of the overall platform in which your avatar, your 2D avatar will be incorporated into, you may want to double check and just see if there are any specific height or width restrictions. That might help you just in sketching and blocking out your avatar as a whole. And so we're assuming that this avatar will probably be shrunk down to about 1 inch by 1 inch. So I'm kind of defining these cheek areas a little further, just coming around here. And just the way his neck kind of rolls into his shirt. Now, we've got everything kind of tapering down, so we're making some adjustments, tapering down into his smaller torso. Again, we made this bust or this torso a lot smaller because the focus is on the head. That's where all the main expression is going to really be received. And so we don't want it's just really there for just to support his head. So just kind of coming around, working around this collar. I've worked in the chin there. In this lesson, we're going to continue working on our 2D avatar by adding some line work to our sketch. So let's go ahead and dive right back in. So in the previous lesson, we fleshed out our sketch based off of our photo reference of our kind of goofy looking, silly looking nerd guy over here. And we also decided to go ahead and add a shocked expression as well. So we can kind of see that on its own layer there. And we're going to save this shocked expression so we can work in an additional secondary expression later on in a later lesson. So let's go ahead and hide the visibility of our shocked sketch layer, and we're going to go ahead and turn the visibility back on for our sketch layer. And you'll notice I've created a new layer above this which I've titled line work. So this is where we're going to be adding our line work over our rough sketch lines that we've added in the previous lesson. So before we go forward, let's go ahead with our sketch layer selected in our layers panel. Let's bring down the opacity to around 50%. And we'll go ahead and click on our line work layer. And again, I'm just reducing the opacity of my sketch layer just so I can kind of differentiate between my line work and my sketch lines when applying my clean line work. So I'm going to go over here to my tool panel, and I'm going to just go ahead and hit this little butt icon right here, and this will just take me to a black color to apply my line work. So just zooming in. Now I may want to go ahead and adjust my brush tip. I'm going to switch to a hard round brush, and going over here to my brush panel, I'm going to turn on shape dynamics, again making sure I got pressure sensitivity by having pen pressure selected for my brush tip size, and we'll go ahead and turn on transfer as well, again making sure I've got pen pressure applied to both opacity and flow. Now I'm basically going to be adding a cleaner layer of line work, and we're going to explore how to keep our lines relatively fine and clean. We don't want them to get too thick in certain areas, just because as we shrink down the avatar it may get a little rough or get a little muddy rather. Now I'm not going to worry about my lines being absolutely pristine. I just want them to look a lot cleaner than that rough, sketchy line work I had below. We're not going to worry about it being 100% perfectly crisp, because as we zoom out, just zooming out real quick and unchecking the visibility rather for our sketch layer, we can see that that line's going to clearly be a lot cleaner than the rough, sketchy line beneath. So just zooming back in, we'll go ahead and resume on this ear right here, the screen left ear. Just kind of going over our sketch layer. Now there are certain areas where you may want to concentrate on having a little thicker line. So we're going to be kind of concentrating and thinking about line weight of our line work. Now if you have an area where your line work gets a little thicker, that's to really help convey or add to depth or rolling of the skin, rolling of a particular facial feature. So adding kind of a thicker line around these nostrils will kind of help the illusion that this area kind of rolls, kind of gives a little bit of depth and dimension. But again, we're going to be very careful about how thick our line work gets. We don't want really, really thick line work because it'll get really muddy shrunken down. So I'm just coming around the mouth here, just working in my line work. Now in a later lesson, as I mentioned before, we're going to take that shocked sketch expression and we're going to use that as a guide to modify our line work that we're adding right now for a different expression. So that's why we went ahead and did that additional rough sketch for an extra expression. As I mentioned in the first lesson, a lot of avatars come stocked with an array of expressions that a user can cycle through to just convey their overall mood. They may be different moods they may be experiencing in a game, for example. So you'll notice I'm getting my lines a little thicker right here just to really show these prominent smile lines that he has. So if we go ahead and zoom out, we can see how that registers at